All right, welcome back. Well, just to shed some light on some of what you heard and perhaps what to expect, we've got two gentlemen joining us this morning. Ayowande Adalemo is here in the studios. He's the founder of Atmosphere Fintech. Atmosphere Fintech, that's what it is, right?
We're Atmosphere.
Atmosphere.
Yeah, just Atmosphere.
Then Fintech, he's a Fintech expert as well.
Just Atmosphere?
Yes.
Oh, Atmosphere for funds.
Okay. Sounds like an NGO.
And we have Mr. Tenyola Olushola, who is a national coordinator, Nigeria Alliance for Affordable Internet, joins us virtually. Good morning, and thank you for joining us as well today on the program.
Good morning, Chamberlain, and to your other guests and to those who have viewed this session this morning. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so I haven't listened, and several people just trying to grasp and glean what they can from what this means when it does kick off today. So, I mean, you are in this space. So, from your understanding, what is this about?
So, from my understanding, I think overall it's a very good move. And
they're for everybody or for the elites, because some say it's elitist.
Well, it's not elitist, actually. It's not. And it's a win-win for virtually everybody. And I'm glad my Oga is here with us today. Morning, sir. So, you see, when you have money in your bank, you really don't have any money, sincerely. Except you have that legal tender in your hand, that note, or that coin. We don't have coins anymore in the country. That is when you have legal tender in your hand. What you have in the bank is a promise of fulfillment. So when I transfer money from my app to your phone, as an example, you see your account details. But if anything perhaps should happen to that bank, the bank goes insolvent, it goes bankrupt, or whatever happens, you've lost all your money because it's not real money. For the e-Naira, however, whatever happens to the bank, your money is with you. It is legal tender, but digital. And it is the standard for the CBDCs, central bank digital currencies globally. It also opens up the avenue for innovation for the people at the bottom of the pyramid, the unbanked. So you no longer need a bank to own money, keep money, or transact money.
Are we assuming that the unbanked are tech savvy? They already know the ins and outs of how to coordinate themselves with this?
So the great thing about this thing is that you don't need to be tech savvy. It's money. It's the same way you're handling your 20 naira, your 15 naira, your 1,000 naira, that you handle this.
Yeah, but if the unbanked naturally, I mean, are unbanked when the process is quote unquote as straightforward as it is today,
yeah.
Why do we think that this can then get them on if they have to go through another process, another level of understanding or explanation before they latch onto this one? Because even those who know easily won't latch onto these kind of things, and their theories that explain that. Okay,
so for the unbanked today, why are they not on the banking network? If you want to open a bank account today, for a lot of people, that process is tedious. The bank is far away from quite a number of them. Aside from the major city centers, in most rural communities, you don't even find a bank. Maybe you find mobile money operators in some places. I mean, I was in Ikene over the weekend. You had to walk around a lot to even see a mobile money operator. Maybe the only bank you see in Ikene is the Ikene Microfinance Bank. But with e-Naira, regardless of where you are in the world, you can have access to money. You can have access to your wallet, either by USSD or if you have a smartphone. So it matters not whether a bank is around you or not. And the CBN has done in such a way that there are 3 tiers for individuals. So there's a tier that you can transact up to 20,000 naira, which is okay for rural communities, and you don't need a bank account, you don't need a NIN, you don't need a BVN to do that.
Okay. We'll come to all of those tiers, 0, 1, 2. But Mr. Olushola, so for you, how is this going to play out?
Yeah, thanks for that question, and thanks to the other speaker as well, who's sort of giving you an intro to what is really essentially a digital currency. A digital currency in all aspects is just another digital application. CBN is right to call it a journey. It is effectively a journey because it has some underlying assumptions. First assumption that the CBN has made is that everyone will have a mobile device or some form of device that can interact and hold an e-wallet, whether it's in USSD format or whether it's a smartphone format that the CBN governor described, so you can actually access a server. Secondly, CBN has actually accepted and adopted something called the blockchain technology, something that it had resisted in the past, and other CBNs or central banks around the world are now starting to adopt. The third thing is that the CBN has actually assumed that there is some level of digital literacy and digital skills required to actually understand how to interact, to exchange money that you have in your e-wallets to entities that also can accept the digital e-Naira. The e-Naira itself is a digital format of the fiat. So really what you can do with the Naira, you should be able to do with the digital ID and transaction that it has. So what it has essentially done is to digitalize what we essentially have as called the Naira. However, it still needs to do a lot of awareness because, as you've pointed out, Chamberlain, those that still are not aware of this e-Naira, there has to be some level of trust built in so that they can accept this at the physical layer. Normally, when you introduce digital applications, and this is one of them, it's assumed that you're actually buying digital services that are on the internet. We actually have a low penetration of internet, even though we have quite a number of users, but the actual level of internet penetration is still very low. And we've got research that states that most of this inability to access the internet is via the rural areas and those that cannot afford access to the internet. So, you know, the CBN is introducing something that really is starting the journey for the digital transformation of the country. It would be good for the digital e-Naira to be actually accepted and adopted fully by government under their e-government program so that all transactions within government is done using this e-Naira so it can improve efficiencies, improve productivity, and also the most important thing, give user acceptance and trust in the currency itself. Thank you.
Well, let me begin from the rural area that you started with the other time. At a time when many of the people in these rural areas would rather just save their money under their pillows, and how do we even begin that journey of convincing them that you can save your money in the cloud?
So, my other said, I think there'll be some awareness. But the most significant thing that will happen is that these people will begin to see a huge difference between money in the bank and money in their hands, but it's digital. So as an example, let's assume that the mobile money operators will take advantage of this, because what this will do is that it opens a whole new world of innovation. And I am hoping that people like in our space will latch onto this. ISPs, mobile money operators, mobile network operators will latch onto these and roll out innovative services to rural areas. So let's assume that the mobile money operator, as an example, gets the agent to go from one store to the other to say, oh, this is a product we have now. If I come to your store, I don't need to give you physical cash. All you need is create this, dial this number, you create this, and I can pay you your money peer-to-peer. That is the game changer. The challenge we have now is that if I want to pay you now, I have to dial a star, something, I wait for the network operator until the network operator now responds to me, or I go to an app and the internet is not working. But with e-Naira, all I can do is if I have NFC on my phone or some kind of interface, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, whatever the technology is, I just point my phone to your phone or my device to your device, and the money is done. A lot of these stores and shops in rural communities will begin to catch on to this eventually when they see the speed and then the fact that there are no costs on transactions.
And what happens if the phone got stolen?
So right now, if my phone gets stolen right now, what happens is that because it's your money is safe. And because of the underlying technology that powers this, it's powered by blockchain. So that technology confers upon me some level of security that even if it is stolen, except I have access to your NIN, your BVN, and some other security detail, before I can begin to use that service. So as a result, it's a tokenized service. So before I can make a transaction with you, a token is generated. So even if I steal your phone, your money is safe, as against the electronic money that we have, that once I have access to your phone, all I need to do is know whatever, try whichever of the banks you're using, and I have access to your money.
There's a question that I was hoping that you would get to.
Okay.
You said that the difference between e-money and the what we have in our banks
Yes.
now is that with e-money you don't need a bank.
Yeah, you don't need a bank.
Now, who do I hold if anything happens to my money? I mean, if anything happened to the money of the rural dweller, the farmer, the shepherd, and everything, they can easily go to their bank. What happens if someone, oversees them due to the level of illiteracy, gets their codes, uses their codes, siphons their money?
So
they can't hold anyone.
No, they can. With e-Naira, I like the way the CBN has arranged this. Essentially, you are banking with the Central Bank of Nigeria. And then the other banks also have some level of control over their customers. But if you are not with any bank, you're essentially banking with the CBN. So if anything happens to your money, you hold the CBN responsible for whatever has happened to your money. However, again, e-Naira is significant. Yes, you can. e-Naira is
people are having challenges holding the regular banks. That's where
I'm going.
Who's going to regulate CBN?
Now, the challenge with the regular banks we have now, and this is where innovation, I hope innovation will come in, is that the entire infrastructure that serves your money, your virtual money, remember I said earlier that your legal tender is only legal when it is a note in your hand and you're paying, right? When you do an electronic transfer, you're relying on the promise of the NDIC, the bank, and the CBN for that to happen.
And you say this is the elitist.
Now, with e-Naira, it is significantly different because, number one, the underlying technology is blockchain. Number two, your money is secure with you. So whatever happens to it, there's sets of contracts that allows me to transact with you that makes that money safer than the virtual currencies that we have now.
I think you lady, when you say there's a lot of enlightenment that needs to be done.
Yeah,
but let me ask Mr. Chenoladi, to track corruption, it's easy to go through the banks. But if what Mr. An element of atmosphere is saying that now the money is literally in the atmosphere, so to speak.
That's dangerous.
So I mean, he's saying that it's not to any particular bank. Some would say it will make it so much easier to engage in corrupt activities. I mean, you just transfer the money from one account into some cloud that. How then do we fight corruption? How does it help to fight corruption?
You raised an interesting point, and to be fair to the other speaker, it's not going to be in the atmosphere. It is essentially zeros and ones. And zeros and ones right now, that represents the amount that you have in your bank account, and which also will represent a proportion of it that you've transferred to your e-wallets, will be sitting in the blockchain technology. Now, the actual interaction in between the device that you hold and the amount that you have in your account will obviously be encrypted. And I believe that the CBN team that has introduced this has done some research. And the research would indicate that there will be two-way verification and the data will be encrypted. The point of concern, though, is actually social engineering. How do we know effectively if your device has been stolen? How do we know when you actually swap SIMs on your device and that the user is the actual user that's accessing your wallet and obviously the money that you have stored in the blockchain? And that's the area of weakness. The second area I think that we also look at is the digital infrastructure that underlies what we are assuming exists here as opposed to other countries that have a lot more enabling digital infrastructure. And obviously have carried out pilot tests pilot tests is, I assume, what CBN is doing right now, because at the moment, we do have some black spots in terms of coverage. And you are using USSD to use as a workaround to a smartphone device that actually has a mobile application that can incorporate this level of encryption is somewhat of a bit of a concern. So what we can do and what we should do is to emphasize on digital awareness, on some of the challenges of actually using this type of technology, so that users in the rural area can fully understand some of the risks, the limitations, and the restrictions as we have now. And then there'll be continuous messaging from CBN or government as they phase in more applications, more features that will enrich the user's experience, and also to obviously plug the gaps that will always exist when you're introducing this type of new technology. I hear my colleague talk about innovation. Innovation is correct. It is the way to go forward. Nigeria has its own idiosyncratic way of adopting technology, and I think that the CBN is right to launch it now, but they also have to do it in piecemeals, and that's why they've restricted some of the technology and what you can do with it, because they're aware that there are certain areas they need to focus on to ensure that the concerns raised by you and in the question are addressed as we go along.
Well, gentlemen, what about the question of hacking? What's going to happen to that, Mr. Dushola? People have concerns about that too.
Yes, that's a valid concern, because obviously if you have your money physically in paper form and you've got it under the pillow, as you've suggested, unless someone comes in and takes your money from under your pillow, you know your money will still be there. But as you stated, if it's in the cloud, it's on the blockchain technology, there is some level of security applied there. But as I said before, it's usually around social engineering. I think the weakest link in all this is the social engineering aspect. And it speaks to the digital literacy issue, and we can't move away from this. I mean, I understand that people can learn certain things, but it takes time. It's not that everyone is on the same level of education. So if you're trying to bring in those that are unbanked and they represent a significant number, you have to remember, though, there are those that actually are unserved or underserved in this country, and they represent tens and tens of millions of Nigerians. So in one case, we are trying to reach the unbanked. In the majority of those cases, those people will be in the unserved areas. So they have no access. And those that have access, and those are in the rural areas, they struggle with power, they struggle with charging their phones, and they also struggle with accessing information. And I think that the best thing for the government is to really send out jingles over the radios or send it in their languages so that it can actually be onboarded in a manner that allows them to fully understand that, yes, their money is exposed to these non-actors, or say bad actors, for instance, who are keen to gain access to your money that you would have had under your pillow, but now you have in the cloud. The more that they understand and they know, the more they will be more secure, and they won't divulge sensitive information to those that are going to try and use social engineering to extract that information to access their well-earned money.
Which then leads one to ask, is this really then about getting the unbanked with all of these challenges, or isn't this just about ensuring that, look, this Bitcoin chaps don't run riots on all of us, providing an alternative for the Bitcoin?
Well, I said that there's a trust issue. The youth that makes up the vast majority of our population in Nigeria, and really, when you look at the likes of the social media aspect, look at those that have founded it. Look at the age, typically, of those that have founded the digital realm. They are young. The Bitcoin community is full of young people, I must say. You know, they're probably below 25 or maybe even below 30. But the key point is that they built a community that they trust in. The government obviously has to respond, because there is a gap filled by private digital cryptocurrency. So without an e-Naira, and remember, there are other central banks around the world that are looking into this, but they are piloting it because they realize that they are building on a legacy system, and the CBN can't ignore the fact they're building on a legacy system that works, that needs to interoperate with e-Naira, just like Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies have to. So the future really is around trust. And the youth at the moment, that's the Gen Ys, the Gen Zs, and the Alphas, really trust what they've built, which is in private hands. So it's for government to interact, to actually, well, they can regulate to a degree, but obviously, in terms of people accepting the e-Naira, it's all about awareness and trust. If I don't trust storing my money that's under my pillow in a digital form, it won't happen, irrespective of any mechanism you put in place. So there'll be a coexistence of paper fiat money, digital money, and when we get to a digital society, a truly digital society that is sophisticated, digitally skilled, digitally literate, then you'll have transactions in between digital currencies and digital services and products that will be done through e-commerce platforms, social media platforms, as the case is in other advanced environments. Thank you.
Well, now, if you, the same questions, the question of trust, and then the Bitcoin. So there's so many issues. Are people really, I think they know that they're not going to find people just embrace this so quick, especially when that trust issue is huge. How do you see them overcoming this?
The volume of transactions initially will be low. And when people see that the networks can be trusted, and again, where the CBN is committed to creating awareness and education, we just have to do that. But the trust will build over time when people see that this is probably safer than what I'm using now. The adoption, again, like you rightly said, will be a youth-based adoption, and not people who are probably older.
So it's not just about the unbanked.
It's not just about the unbanked. It's about the digital future of the country, a digital economy. And you're right. It's about a bit of regulation around currencies that are digital. Now, this is not cryptocurrency. The only similarity between cryptocurrency and the central bank digital currency is the fact that they're both blockchain-based technologies. That's the only similarity. But in terms of operation, one is completely unregulated, and it's on the free world. This is regulated by fiat, which is by the central bank. So the central bank,
which to some people they will think, I mean, if people are benefiting from operating in that space that's not regulated, and they have huge volumes that can be transacted in that area, why would they leave that and come to this that is regulated? So and you can spend 50, 100,000.
So you can trade, you can earn interest on e-Naira, you can earn interest in with your Ethereum, your and all that. But this is where it gets interesting. So the banks, I'm thinking of what are the banks thinking now? Because what happens is that when you deposit money with the banks, they take that money and give it out as loans. With e-Naira, that's going to change significantly if we get volume of transactions. If millions of people decide, I'm going to keep my money in e-Naira, it takes power away from the banks.
So the bank executives are going to be worried.
No,
this is going to reduce the level of transaction that happens with the regular banks.
Well, so two things can happen, and I hope they will happen. The bank can come to you and say, you have your e-Naira. Can you give me your e-Naira, and then we can do transactions with your e-Naira, and you share a revenue of that transaction, which is why I said innovation will begin to happen. The second thing that can happen is that the CBN will tell the banks, okay, so we will give you a particular amount of e-Naira so you can loan out to the economy at this regulated returns on investment so that the economy can flourish. At the end of the day, it is all about digitizing the economy and ensuring that innovation happens. And I'm hoping that, I'm sure, I mean, the bankers all agreed to this. I'm sure that bank executives have sat down to realize that, okay, this is how we'll go about this. If it catches on, if it becomes mainstream, and the CBN can make that happen on social media with the right kind of campaign, with the right kind of awareness, and it catches on with our young people, then bank executives begin to go back to their drawing table to say, okay, this is how we're going to play this so that we can also have some share of this market. Because what this has done is that's taken money away from the banks into the hands of individuals.
But the value of e-Naira is still the same thing as the value of the other.
Yes, of the Naira.
So
because it's a legal tender actually. It's actually your Naira, but a real digital version of Naira as against your money, your app before. But now this is real money.
As far as anyone is, most people are concerned, there is hardly any difference between e-Naira or any digital currency from any central bank in the world and cryptocurrency. They are both concealed.
Yeah.
Now, this whole conversation started because cryptocurrencies began to gain a lot of prominence. So it's like the central banks all over the world saying, let's get into this because it looks like it's viable. Now, why should any young person in the world prefer any e-Naira or any digital currency of their country to cryptocurrency?
Okay, so the currencies, the applications of both currencies are different. Most people do cryptocurrencies as a means of earning an income. It's trade, for trading. Some use it to buy things online abroad. The e-Naira is significantly different from cryptocurrency in its application. It is used as a legal tender in Nigeria. So even if you have your Bitcoin or your Ethereum or whichever the cryptocurrencies you hold, you can still transfer that into e-Naira, as the case may be, and spend as a legal tender here.
So you can convert cryptocurrency, what you call cryptocurrency, into digital currencies.
Into digital currencies, yeah. So you can do that. That's one. But essentially, what anyone will do if I have cryptocurrencies is to look at, again, innovation now comes into play. To look at how can I bridge the gap between cryptocurrency, which is unregulated, and my new e-Naira. So I'm in a diaspora, as an example, and I want to do business in Nigeria. This is where e-Naira now comes in. So how can I get e-Naira as a diasporan outside Nigeria? And I want to do business with Nigeria. What it means is that I can easily convert the cryptocurrencies into whatever digital currency is available and transfer to my e-wallet and then make transactions in Nigeria. Borderless transactions begin to happen. It probably might even become maybe an ECOWAS standard if the card is played properly.
All right, we'll explore that a little further when we return in just a moment. Don't go away. Welcome back. How do you say that, diasporans will be able to do this? Because if you look at the tiers 0, those who don't have any name attached to their phones, you have a limit. And that's between 20,000 Naira and then 120,000 Naira. That's the limit that they set on that one. Then tier 1 category, that's for those who have verified name. The daily transaction limit is set at 50,000 Naira to 300,000 Naira as the balance. Then you have the tier 2 category, and they'll be able to transact up to 200,000 Naira daily with an e-wallet balance of 500,000 Naira, while tier 3 will have daily transaction of 1 million with balances of 5 million. So those are the categories that exist there. So still some limits.
Yeah, so the initial limits are because we're just starting out. But because it's a digital currency, what will happen down the line is that there will be interoperability. A lot of central banks will begin to adopt it. Central banks are not rushing it now because everybody wants to watch. And like Mr. Teniola said earlier, there are a lot of dark spots, a lot of gray areas here that needs to be smoothing out before it becomes global adoption. What I see that will happen is that there will be interoperabilities with legacy systems and then the digital currencies. What that means is means of identification in countries, government-issued means of identification, such as security numbers in the US as an example, or the ones in the UK, will be accepted means of accessing the tier 2 or the tier 3 as we move forward. And because it's digital, such interoperability is pretty very easy. And then you now have security agencies globally like the Interpols, the FBI, the CIAs, and all looking at ensuring that there are legal and crime laws around whatever happens to these currencies.
So if there are so many dark spots, as you both have said, why now? There are only 5 countries in the world that have adopted this so far. Even the big economies are still very pussyfooty about this. So the question a number of people will be asking is, why are we in a hurry?
So for a government, I think responsibility is the first thing that will come to a government's mind. I don't know if that is the reason with the CBN, but look at what has happened in the cryptocurrency world. A whale comes up and buys billions of bitcoins, and then the price just suddenly drops. When the CBN restricted banks from transacting cryptocurrency transactions a couple of months ago, there was a lot of brouhaha around that. But there was a lot of sense in it because almost immediately the price of Bitcoin tanked. And we're still battling scarcity of dollars in our country. You can imagine what would have happened to the banks if they had done such volumes of transactions. $500 million, $600 million for Nigeria alone. So responsibility is what comes to the minds of central banks around the world. How can we offer our young people what they want, at the same time protect them? Because the unregulated cryptocurrency world is open up to, I mean, you can't even trace, if your cryptocurrency is stolen, you can't trace who stole it. You can't find whoever has taken that. A lot of people have gone with wallets that you can't trace again, and there are millions of dollars in those wallets.
I'll still come to ask you a question about can I reverse my transaction? But let me ask Mr. Olushola the same question about whether or not we're in a hurry to get this done, because even the big economies all over the world are still very cautious. Even though it's a priority, they're still very, very, very slow about it. Just about 5 countries or so. And the U.S. is talking about the Chinese digital yuan and, back and forth like that. So are we in a hurry, or you think it's just the right time?
Well, Ayo, you asked another very good question. And let me say it this way. Digital currency, or a variant of that, has been introduced in the States, you mentioned the States, in the 1980s. So they've really experimented and have failed in trying to introduce some form of controlled digital currency into their economy. But remember, they have very strong legacy systems that are electronic in format. So they come with procedures, processes that works for them. And when I say them, that's the advanced countries that have actually been able to integrate cryptocurrency into their systems. So what do I mean by that? You remember that digital currency has gone through several evolutions, and they've learned from their past mistakes. So they've been on this long, extended pilot for many years. And if I take the UK, for instance, which I'm very familiar with, you're right, they're very cautious because there's a lot of issues around data protection, data privacy. And they currently have systems that has KYC and AML built into it. That is, know your customer and anti-money laundering systems in their systems already. Built in, very secure, tried and tested and proven. So you go into an electronic shop, for instance, and they exist in some parts of London and other major cities in the UK. You can actually do a transaction without any human interaction and get your goods at that point in time, there and there, within maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, But generally, a lot of transactions now are done using current systems in digital format, using the blockchain system, which is actually at the back end. So a user doesn't actually know that they're actually using digital currencies, because it isn't actually slapped in their face to say you are using the pound, for instance. But the next phase for them would be, okay, if they want to access the cryptocurrency market to ensure that they remain relevant. And what do I mean by that? That the legacy systems are not swept aside by the new, innovative, dynamic systems that they don't understand. Remember, the banking system is very conservative by nature, historically. So it is really for them to remain relevant. But in the UK's sense, they have a very strong city. That's the city square mile, that is their financial strength, and has been doing a lot of cross-border transactions for eons now. So for them, just to create a digital version of that isn't such a threat to their legacy systems. It's just a new evolution. In Nigeria's case, we don't have that sort of baggage. We really have various systems that have been implanted by the banking sector, and they're really depends on who runs and owns the banks. They've introduced their own systems. So that's why cryptocurrency has become such a huge success in Nigeria, because actually there isn't much control over what gets done. So in terms of the youth, they are looking to secure their future. The Naira itself, whether it's in paper form or digital form, isn't seen as a secure asset for them. So they rather speculate and store their wealth or what they've built over the years in another form that they feel they can control. So what we have at the moment is that you have no option for CBN, even irrespective of what they've said in the past that they shouldn't be involved in cryptocurrency or even digital currency in any shape or format. They've realized that really if they ignore it for much longer, then they might actually lose total control of the future of banking, and fintech is one good example where you've seen a lot of interest by foreigners to create a fintech ecosystem that can replace the traditional banking system. So it is almost painfully for them to state, we really need to jump onto this bandwagon, otherwise we'll lose out in the future. And that's not the situation you find from other societies where they've actually built systems and they just converted them to digital. It's just really, we need to define our processes and procedures so that the youth, those are unbanked, understand exactly what they're buying into. Otherwise, we'll basically be playing catch up.
Well, we're out of time, and we can't ask you about affordability of the internet, because if people don't have that, they can't even do anything with this e-money, for instance. So that's the equally good component. But gentlemen, we'll have to thank you both for coming on. Teniola Olushola is the National Coordinator for Nigeria Alliance for Affordable Internet. We've also have had Ayowande Adalemo, founder, Atmosphere. He's a fintech expert, not atmospheric. Thank you both. We'll switch attention now to, Prison Break, which just occurred. Well, not just occurred, but that is what we'll be talking about next. Don't go away.
Well, thanks for staying with us. Mr. Fatai Owodshini joins us to get a better understanding of what you have just seen. He is SA to the Governor of Oyo State on security. Thanks for joining us this morning, Mr. Owodshini. Well, in the first place, your job is not easy, no doubt. But a number of people are wondering, how did this even happen in the first place? Can you please give us a background? Exactly what happened, and did we see this coming?
Let me first start by saying it is what it is. I'm not in position to give a background as to how it happens because I don't work there. Okay. And I'm not one of the correctional officers. They should be able to give, information as to how did it happen. But if we just want to generalize, the Yoruba people says, that is, if your neighbors, your family members are dying, you should also, mysteriously, you should also not let your guards down. This is not the first jailbreak we're going to have this year in this country. Not just only this year. And when things happen like that, you probably take precautionary measures in other places. That's the way I would put it. Did we do that? Did the correctional facilities management, were they able to do that? If those things were done, what were the results? And of course, going to that facility yesterday, if a threat or risk analysis had been carried out, 100% from professional security angle, that facility would be classified as most vulnerable. And that's the way I'll put it.
Really, one would say that it was just an evil marking time that would eventually happen. But on the front pages of the papers this morning, we heard, what what someone says that ascribed to the presidency, that coordinated attack on prisons is it's coordinated. Consequently, perhaps there is a script being played.
For such crimes, you will call it coordinated and organized crime. It is not something that just suddenly happened. It doesn't happen randomly. There'll be a lot of efforts that have been put in by those who carried out the crime. And of course, as per experience, you will also say such thing won't happen without some element also inside knowing, especially some of the inmates. How much monitoring do they have in place, especially in a country where we say most of our correctional facilities are overwhelmed? Have we even done anything in the course of our investigations, all the previous jailbreaks that would say we are investigating? What are the results of those investigations? And of course, when you also have most of the security institutions being on the defensive, most of the times things happen like this. They probably will not come up with something that will be implicative of the personnel that work there. Like I've mentioned, how many correction officer do we have to an inmate? That particular facility, how many inmates should they have taken? How many do we have there? And all these things are supposed to have come into focus a very long time ago. But with everything in institutions in this country, institutions are neglected. And I must say, I'm not preaching for the correctional institution. That institution is one of the critical institutions when you talk of criminal justice administration, and how much are they carried along in what they are doing. The officers, how much motivation is given to them. I met a police service when I joined. I'll give you two examples. You have the fella Nicola Pokuti, may so rest in peace, expensive shit case. What do they mean by expensive shit? Is to monitor things. When fella was arrested and he was said in pidgin English to say, oh, I will suffer these people that will not see exhibit. They had some detectives who volunteered, who the criminals don't know, who were in the cell with fella Ransom Kuti, who says, they volunteered themselves because then motivation was high. 2-3 days, fella did not go to toilet. And as of the time he went to toilet, these volunteers were the people that packed the shit. And that was how they were able to detect the exhibits. That is why they call it expensive shit. Odozi Obodo's case was also there in those days, in the Ebonyi State now, where that fellow was killing people. Some detectives volunteered to be Babalawo's herbalist working for him. These are things that some other countries will do when personnel are highly motivated, that when you have high-risk inmates, some people will volunteer to be there. They will check whether they are using telephone. When people come to visit them, they would also check their telephone, how much conversation. And we are now talking to the element, which is also critical, involvement of the community. It's been said that no criminal can be bigger than the community. They didn't just go with those explosives there at that time. They must have been hanging around the community. And that is why in the state, we've been talking of, raising up the non-state actors for voluntary policing sector. So
okay, but Mr. Ocean, we'll talk about what the states, can do in a moment. But when you refer to the community, and yes, you also said it's not the first time this is happening. Remember, recently there was Owerri, then there was Benin, Kaba, now Oyo, and government seems to have the same kind of response time and again. But doesn't this can be, people look at the cycle and they feel if you want the community to come in here How are they going to do that? Because at the end of the day, they feel, look, if people that we blew the whistle on have got out, they come out to threaten us, why should they involve themselves in ensuring that these kind of things happen or don't happen?
Chamberlain, I'll go back to what I said. No criminal is bigger than the community. The community is very strong. If a community decides to help to secure, the place will be properly secured. In your state, when we changed our approach to we changed our security architecture approach, that we are bringing in elements of the community, which we call voluntary policing sectors and volunteers. The local government have been putting this together. It's still, something that is evolving. For example, now in Ibadan, they had the community heads that they call magajis to get involved. And as this thing spread, the community would see themselves as having a civic obligation. So they won't be scared. And that is why we talk of voluntary policing sector and the kind of neighborhood volunteer personnel. Each of the local government has been going that. Like I said, it's evolving. Maybe by the time it goes wider, these fellows are people that volunteer, that they feel that they are critical elements of security. No uniform service can do it alone now. And that is what Oyo State is doing with the integrated security architecture, the concept that we've put up. Like I said, it's just evolving. And I hope that by the time we spread it, people will know, because you cannot do such a thing successfully without someone seeing people coming in. Even the officers that are there, how many of them are there? How much of that's a facility that is covered with bush all around. Maybe some of the personnel too were doing farming around the place. It is highly vulnerable. If I say a place is vulnerable, that place is highly vulnerable. The road to the place is also not motorable and all those things. So these are things that, like I have mentioned as well, investigations that have been done before. It has happened several times. Who is even doing this investigation? What lessons have they learned? If you don't learn lessons from previous things that have happened, that is why they talk of institutional memory, best practices. How much of those recommendations, if anybody even studied them at all? The correctional institution is one of the most abandoned. Having worked in the police, I can see how they labor to get their work done. And that facility in that Oyo is most highly vulnerable. I will continue to repeat it.
So what kind of collaboration is the state going to have with FG to ensure these things don't happen, or at least they play a role? For instance, I mean, the governor talked about installing CCTV. So is that in addition to perhaps monitoring all those other key spots? Are those part of things that will be coordinated alongside the federal government?
Yes, they say, it's often said that heaven helps those who help themselves. If a vulnerability tests have been done, I had the DSS officer saying, when this incident happened in Kogi, a kind of threat analysis was done. What did the institution do about it? And that is why, like His Excellency Governor Seyi Makinde rightly said, if you are head of such institution and you've not done such threat analysis and say, I lack this, I lack that, there is no way the state would have known. And His Excellency that said it rightly, the immediate grading of the road leading to that facility, we would expect that the correctional institution, and I'm very sure the state can also support them in doing a clearing of the surrounding to give room for visibility. How much lightning is put there, I'm very sure the state, His Excellency, is supportive of all the federal security institutions in the state. So we would look at that as well. His Excellency has also mentioned the issue of CCTV. It is not new to us. If probably a kind of threat analysis has been done, and that has been brought to the knowledge of the government, maybe it would have been covered. We have a CCTV camera that covered up to Ogbomoso along the road, from Ibadan. It's not as if the 4 places have been covered, from Ibadan to Oyo, Fiditi to Ogbomoso. Along the line, we'll be adding to the cameras, and this will be taken as a priority as well. So with that, because even when the schools thing were coming up, I would say that Oyo State is one of the states, the few states, if any other state has it, the Safe School Initiative, that some schools in Oyo State are covered with cameras. It's evolving. It's not as if all have been covered. With the panic alarm button, that from the state control room, you can see what is happening in some of the schools that have been covered so far. With a panic alarm button, which we alert the nearest security institution within that place, the management of the school, and the state control room, including the operation boss and the police. So these things, it's not just rhetoric. It's not just that Governor Seyi Makinde pronounced it. It is something that is in existence in the state. It's just for us to expand it. And it may be if all these things have been brought to the knowledge of the state before, because I started with heaven helps those who help themselves. Maybe all these things would have been done. And it also comes to the fact that most of the governors have been saying, yes, it is difficult for some people, for some of us to agree to say, decentralize this, decentralize that. It is high time that maybe some powers and authority would be devolved. If the states are committing all these resources, and we are making, when we have meetings, first time we say we've made so much billions of naira, how much do they, plow back to the states that has been supporting? They use the state, the state support system to do this. Nothing is coming back. We probably would be thinking of, call it restructuring, call it devolution of power. The federal government cannot be everywhere. And this is one key example from, I have not been to that facility before. And I wonder if the Controller General has been to that facility before. All these things come to play. You see an observation point that is a Lord Lugard type of observation point. The place is really vulnerable. I would expect that when investigation is conducted, we'll be true to ourselves and the officers themselves too, because that is also critical. When you continue to be on the defensive, you will not be able to say, this is where the shoe is pinching me on the leg, so that they will know how to address it. Rather than coming up with, these are the problems I have, we continue to be on the defensive so that they will not say, oh, you are the one that caused it. It has happened. So let us do things that will prevent other things happening.
Well, the questions are still, limitless. One of the reports we have also indicates that awaiting trial are the only ones attacked. The convicts are still intact. The female, inmates are still intact, and all of that. And then the vulnerability of the communities, the culpability, if any, of the communities. All those ones are still begging, the questions still begging answers. But for now, we have to thank you very much for being a part of our conversation this morning. Fatai Oshi's essay to the Governor of Oyo State on security. Thank you for your time. We're back in a moment for more. Do stay with us.
All right. Welcome back. Well, we're turning our attention to that conversation about metering Nigerians. And so, yes, there was a directive from the federal government to meter millions of Nigerians and stop estimated billing. So where are we on that? Two gentlemen joining us this morning to speak about that. Mr. Yahya is a legal practitioner and an energy consultant. We also do have engineer Kola Balogun, who himself is the MD of MOMAS, that's a meter manufacturing company. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us on the program today.
Yeah, good morning.
All right, Mr. Balogun, let me start with you about this matter. It's been talked about, who knows for how long now, and it will continue to be. So from your assessment, that directive to, 4 million rollout for this next phase, what kind of progress or where are we exactly in the scheme of things? If you give us your impression of that.
Thank you very much, Chamberlain. For the first time in the history of intervention, Nigerian government has really done so much in this atmosphere of military intervention. You recall that during the past administration, 1 million meter was promised that consumer will have 1 million meter free, but it didn't see the light of the day at the end of the day. But this intervention has come to be. The last stakeholder meeting we had, 750 meters has been rolled out from the 1 million meter promise to the consumer. And that is the reason why we should applaud this government for this little intervention. We still have a lot of metering gap. We still have more than 6 million metering gap. But there's a second phase coming up now, which is phase 1. The earlier phase was called phase 0, which is the in-country meters need to be installed to the consumers, which have been registered to various DISCO. And that was been done up to 75%. But there's another scheme coming up under the same intervention that the manufacturer will be encouraged to produce and distribute to the DISCO. And that's where we are now. They are in the evaluation stages, and very soon the rollout plan will come out and we'll be able to now roll out for the second phase.
Is it a challenge of infrastructure or a challenge of a wide gap to be met?
Yes, it's the gap that we have in the country. The metering gap is huge, and the structure of the infrastructure is another setback because there are no linear process of installing meters. When you install one house here, the next house can be another miles away, and that's create a lot of logistics. Also, we are using this opportunity to build up human capability, that is training young ones to be able to key into the scheme so that we can have a lot of youth to know how to do metering installation. Well, as I'm talking to you, there's some training that is even going on to empower the youth so that they will be able to know how to do meter installation in all the DISCOs across the country. So infrastructure is a setback because there are no logistics arrangements for us to move meter to every household. Also, financing is a major setback, and that's why the CBN is intervening. So, but it has to be on a continuous basis so that there won't be any stopgap. Because as soon as we create a stopgap, the global logistics procurement of components will set in. And once there's a lead time between the financier and the supplier of components, then there will be a lot of gap. And those are things we are trying to make sure that it doesn't happen again. As they intervene in the phase 0, and we have clocked up to 75% performance, let the intervention continue so that there won't be any stopgap, so that the phase 0 will kick in and will continue rolling out the meter.
All right, Mr. Aya, how does this rollout come across to you?
Thank you very much, Chamberlain. Without an iota of doubt, the mass metering rollout is a germane idea and a good initiative by the federal government of Nigeria. And the policy framework such that only local meter manufacturers can participate in this scheme is very laudable. However, this policy is an isolated solution to an enterprise problem. What do I mean by that? Yes, we have metering manufacturers who have not been able to meet their capacities, and it is essential that government supports them so that they can be able to manufacture at full capacity. However, there is an end-to-end process in the entire supply chain for metering in the Nigerian electricity supply industry. And what am I talking about? Is that the meter manufacturers, for one, many of them are assemblers, and a very few ones like Engineer Kola Balo, whose name called are original equipment manufacturers. However, in any case, they still need access to forex, to be able to procure the requisite materials and components and the assembly parts to produce this. Has that been adequately addressed? I think the answer is no. Also, is that if you want to deploy this type of mass metering plan, and we want to deploy 1 million meters within a certain definitive time frame, what have we put in place? Do we have the adequate manpower for the meter service providers that are going to be able to meter the nation at this scale and speed? Do we have the accompanying logistics to be able to support the moving of manpower and goods and all the metering infrastructure across the nation? Most importantly, have we engaged critical stakeholders like the Nigerian Electricity Service Agency, which is the umbrella body for standards and enforcement of quality in the Nigerian electricity supply industry? They are also the custodians of the metering testing station. Have we increased their capacities such that they are able to receive without any hitches the volume of meters that is being rolled out by the national metering plan? I think your guess is as good as mine on where we are today and how well the policies is doing if we only address isolated incidences about the issues that we have at hand.
Well, Engineer Kolabalogun, you may want to talk us through the process because there are those who believe that maybe there are some institutional gaps that need to be blocked. There are those who allege that there's a lot of racketeering going on, slowing down the process. What role do the meter manufacturing companies like yours have? What role do the discos have? Who are the people that interface with the customers directly? Talk us through the process and what are the bottlenecks that you have seen?
Thank you. Now, the interface between consumer and the disco is called substation, like a transformer, and the owner of that transformer is the disco, and that's the trading point between the customer and the disco. Every transformer has quite a number of consumers attached to it, and those consumers need to be metered in order to have energy accountability, because it is from that transformer the disco paid the market operator what he has collected from that transformer. However, the statistic, the database at times is not aligned. At times you have insufficient information on the database as to those who are connected to the transformer. And those are the reasons why the disco conducted an audit to ensure that they improve on their customer database so that they can have the right data of the number of consumers they have. Now, the NET, as a regulator, has come out with another to add into the meter rollout scheme, MAP. The MAP has been resurfaced so that any consumer who cannot wait for federal government rollout scheme can as well pay for meter, but the modality is still ongoing. I'm sure in the next 1 month, the modality will be out. For consumers who cannot wait for federal government free meter intervention can as well pay for meter and get meter as quickly as possible.
But isn't that a problem on its own, Engineer Balogun? Because if that gap is there for those who cannot wait, they have automatically opened a doorway for racketeering, with those who have access to the meters. If you can't wait, we're going to come to you in 3 months' time, but if you can't wait, you can pay for it, even though they do have the meters installed already.
Right. Those are the issues that the regulator needs to come out with a way to ensure that we remove racketeering, because it's always there. It's a Nigerian factor. If once we create artificial scarcity, consumer will be desperate and will be able to pay extra mile for whoever that is approaching them. These are things that we need to educate the consumer. So there's a lot of advocacy from the net to educate the consumer that don't deal with a middleman. Go straight to your disco, pay or register your house or register your interest in metering so that the disco will come and assess your house for metering ready and be able to put meter. Because oftentimes, there are some premises you actually go and audit, or you go and do inspection, metering inspection, and you discover that the cross creeks of the cables that are there, you cannot install meter. There will be a lot of technical losses. So they need to rewire the entire house, or because there are a lot of current leakages where you see a lot of cable, quick cross in the premises of the consumer. You can't put meter in such a premises. So the technician needs to go there, rewire the place, and before you put, you now install meter so that you can read efficiently.
Who
Because
bears the cost of that rewiring?
It's the owner of the house. Because originally, before a service is provided to any consumer, there's supposed to be an energy auditing. They're supposed to go there and satisfy the house that electrically it has been standardized. And that is the job of NEMSA. NEMSA is supposed to go there for inspection, confirm that the wiring in this house is okay, is in line with the standard, is in line with IEC, is in line with Nigerian standards. Then you will now inform the DISCO that this consumer is ready for metering. So please provide services into that premises and before you even install the wire, the meters will be there first. That is supposed to be the standard. But because there have been a lot of gaps, there have been breach of processes. Some people have been connected to the system, to the network without metering. Those are the gaps we are bridging now. And that's the intervention federal government is doing to ensure that all those who have been connected without metering are now metered. But the scarcities are there. The funding process is still limited because 1 million meter will cost us averagely 40 billion. So it's a huge capital investment. So, and that's the reason why it takes a gradual process. And however, even if the money is available, the logistics of procuring the raw materials, custom issues are there, clearing process are there, the global pandemic of factories shutting down from getting raw materials are also there globally. And that's why we're saying that we have to keep doing gradual backward integration so that some of these raw materials can be procured locally. And that's part of the system we are running now to ensure that some of these components are gotten locally. By the time Dangote refinery comes on street, we'll be buying some of the chemical raw material from the Dangote, and that will ease the importation, and that will reduce our forex dependence on the raw material as well.
This is just some feedback. Even when the energy audit is done and the owners of premises fund the wiring or rewiring of the entire house, some of those technicians really do a very poor job. It looks terrible compared to what they even met on the ground. So this is something that we see time and again in those places, hoping that they improve upon it. But when you speak about MAP, the argument that they put forward about MAP, they thought it wasn't working, and so they had to come up with this new system. And now that they're going back to MAP, there are several people who were in that scheme. They paid for those meters until they never got it, even after they scrapped MAP. And now you talk about them going to MAP. So what's the consideration for them to even consider going back to that scheme?
Yes, there was a stakeholder consultation by the regulator, called all the stakeholders that what are the suggested way of improving the metering gap. So with all submission, we all agree that if the federal government intervention of the process of getting funding, approval for funding, approval for forest, if any consumer could not wait, let them give them the liberty of freedom to pay and get meters, so that some of us who have meter on the factory will be able to sell further, and some who have imported meters that have it in their warehouse will be able to exercise that sales extend that sales into consumer need. But the federal government insisted that they will keep funding it, but the process is still slow. The phase 1 is coming up. That's why the entire stakeholder give that suggestion that MAP should come back, so that will be another another option for
Since
That
consumers.
means
since
MAP was working.
well, since you are a stakeholder, part of the conversations, is it also in consideration that those who paid previously will be able to renew their requests since they already have their receipts of payment in the previous MAP?
Obviously, it is their rights and they must be metered. Once you have paid and you have a proof of payment, I think it's between the consumer and the disco. And if the disco refuses, NEC is there to intervene, obviously.
Okay.
So they take their complaint to NEC and they will be able to rescue them. But I'm very, very sure disco will be able to meter them when they have the right. Also, at times, what normally led to this kind of delay in deploying meter to consumer premises, if they have a backlog of debts that have been outstanding, at times that brings in a lot of argument that you need to sort out, or you need to have a way to pay up your debt, or you give us a schedule which will be deducting the arrears from you so that we'll be able to meter them. Those are the things that normally slow down the process of installation or agreeing to a consumer who have paid for meter that has not been installed.
Well, Mr. Yaya, it seems that the problem for the consumer is perhaps just beginning. First of all, I mean, you've listened to Engineer Balogun, and you've also heard about all kinds of racketeering, collusion of officials of the distribution companies, creating what Engineer Balogun called artificial scarcity. How do we begin to address these issues?
Thank you very much. You know, one of the biggest challenges currently being suffered in the electricity sector is this issue of sabotage. But, you know, we have to commend the federal government for their responsive solutions to all of these problems. Like, for one, we can't quite address some of these issues if we don't really go to the historical antecedents of how we got here. We all know what happened in Capmine, then we had MAP, and then we had many of the private sector participants that came to invest in MAP, eventually came up and said that they could not access the financing required to be able to fulfill their obligations. It was a very huge challenge. And MAP did okay, but it wasn't as successful as we all projected. Now, this presidential response, which is the mass metering rolling plan, what he does is that the government is just trying to intervene, yes, in delivering these meters to the end users. Now, there is no exclusive list of how a customer can access meters. There are basically 4 options. And the reason why it's made as flexible as possible is just so that you do not frustrate a customer to only one choice or only one process by which they can be metered. And then you continue to expose them to the vulnerability of estimated bidding. And what are these options? If the mass metering rollout plan is still subsisting and is still ongoing, will it on its own be able to close the metering gap? I think time will tell. Second of all is that the discos on their own have not been precluded from purchasing meters and metering their customers at their own cost. That is number 2. Number 3 is that the mass metering program has not in any way alienated the meter asset provider regulation of 2018. Rather, it was amended and collapsed so that it can work together with the mass metering program. So what you see is that there are always efforts just to make sure that the average consumer like you and I have a meter over your wall and you can measure the electricity that you're using. However, just like every process, the human factor and self-interest, unfortunately, is a major challenge, especially for us in Nigeria. There are many good policies that have come, you know, but when the rubber meets the road, how will it pan out? How will it work? How will the people accept it? And how much impact will it have on the Nigerian electricity supply industry at large? Just like I said earlier, I think that the mass metering program is a good initiative. but it is an isolated solution to a complex problem. It is essential that the end-to-end process from the manufacturing of the meters, even from the parts of the manufacturers, just as the manufacturers have said, from the procurement of the forex down to the manufacturing process to actually ensure that the manufacturers actually have the capacities that they claim, down to the people that will install these meters, down to the staffs of the utility companies that want to take advantage of this process for their own selfish goods. And of course, when these meters are eventually manufactured, they are to be tested before they are being deployed to the final consumer. All of these ends, there has to be steady and sustainable investment. They have to be tested. They have to
All right,
be
Mr. Yahya.
verified.
All right, we need to anchor at this point, actually, but we do appreciate both of you for talking to us this morning. Yahya is a legal practitioner, and we also have had Mr. Kola Balogun, who is an engineer, as well as the MD CEO of Momas Electricity Meters Manufacturing Company Limited. Gentlemen, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you very much, Chamberlain.
Let's take a look at some messages coming through from viewers from what they've seen. The digital currency did get some reaction. This one coming from Nicholas. CBN should focus on stabilization of the Naira against Forex instead of coming up with the issue of e-Naira. What is the use of e-Naira to a currency that has performed poorly under the watch of this administration? Naira is not attractive anymore as a currency, and as such, coming up with this is not the right time for such.
Olagunju says about the same issue, Nigeria banned crypto transactions within the banking sector in February 2021, and 8 months later introduced the e-Naira, whilst it took 3 years and NSAS protests for police reforms to be implemented. This very fact shows government can make swift policies when it affects their finances and power. Good policies protect not only the economy and systems, but also citizens and the nation as a whole.
Well, Joseph weighs in as well on the same matter. He says, this is a good initiative for Nigeria and Nigerians. We in this country have a peculiar way of doing things. What has the CBN done to check criminality about the e-Naira? How can I protect my money knowing that armed robbers can come up to me and mandate me to transfer the e-Naira to their own account? This is the kind of foresight the CBN should have beforehand.
Well, Paul is talking about the same thing, says, how I wish our central bank can concentrate on rolling out workable policies that can save our economy from crashing further. Central bank is known to be the banker's bank and not custodians or managers of individual funds. They should monitor the lower banks and protect the depositors instead of competing with the lower banks. I will not be surprised if charges are introduced very soon on e-Naira transactions, which I believe is the CBN's goal for the intervention. Well, let's just hope the CBN can come out and say, okay, this is the education we have for you.
Watch the space. Adeni says about the Oyo jailbreak. If bandits could invade a well-secured and well-fortified Nigeria Defense Academy, how much more of the correctional facility? The only major noticeable security measure you have in many of these facilities are basically guns. You need more than that to man such facilities. And for God's sake, our correctional facilities are overwhelmed. We should either build more or decongest them.
On the same issue, Adigun Olajide says, it is so sad that for the event that happened in Oyo State, but also it is inappropriate for the Interior Minister to announce publicly on the television that thumbprints and their biometrics will be given to the appropriate authorities for the inmates to be apprehended. He would have taken that step instead of the announcement. Now the escaped prisoners will be on lookout for this.
Oh boy. So just several matters that they've got to discuss. Well, that is it today. Thank you all for watching. As always, we appreciate your messages as well. I'm Chamberlain.
And I'm Ayo Makinde. Do have a wonderful day.